Hey guys, welcome to the second video for Unit 8. We are going to be talking today about the differences between the House of Representatives and the Senate that make up Congress. If you missed the last video, we talked about the origin of our bicameral Congress, bicameral meaning two separate chambers, each distinct from one another. And we also talked about the powers of Congress in Article 1 a little bit, talking about the idea of enumerated versus implied powers. Those powers, if they're enumerated, being listed in the Constitution, those implied meaning not explicitly named, but assumed to exist due to their being necessary to implement those expressed powers. So today, I want to talk about a little bit about the House versus the Senate, because yes, we have a Congress that is united, but also the House and the Senate have different responsibilities. There are some differences between them in terms of their size, their functioning, their debates. So I want to go over those with you all. Now, the bicameral design of our Congress has an interesting metaphor, and we actually have George Washington to thank for this. The House of Representatives is known as the cup, and the Senate is known as the saucer. So it's a very interesting metaphor for the way our Congress functions. The House is originally known as the cup, where you pour your hot beverage like coffee or tea. You have to think about the 1700s. But the House of Representatives is hot because it's more connected to the people and their interests. It's more about passion. And then the Senate is the saucer, right? What you set the hot cup on so you don't burn yourself or whatever you're setting the cup on. So the Senate's the saucer in that it's a little bit more experienced, more cautious, it's consistent, it's a check on the lawmaking process. It's also independent and allows for rational thought and reason. Okay. Now, the House of Representatives is known as the People's House for a couple of different reasons that we'll explore. So I want to first talk about representation. The House is the House of Representatives is based on population. There are 435 members. And that is reapportioned, meaning it is decided how many representatives a state has every 10 years based on that state's population. And it's every 10 years because that's when we do the census. So as the populations of states change, the number of representatives they have changed. It's predicted in Ohio for 2020, our population has decreased. Therefore, maybe the number of representatives we have in Ohio will decrease as well. The House of Representatives represents what we call a district, and a district is a small geographic area. And this allows for the House to have a more intimate constituent representative relationship, so the relationship between the congressperson and the people that they represent. And ultimately, the House is designed to represent the will of the people. The House has only 2-year terms, and they're up for re-election at the same time. These 2-year terms force representatives to consider the popular opinions of the people that they represent, unless they, be replaced by unsatisfied voters in the next election. So that's part of where this passion comes from, right? There's a lot of quick action. They have to listen to the passions of the people as well. It's not as consistent as we will see with the Senate. Now, the Senate is known as the Millionaires Club. The Senate is seen as more of like an elite body of Congress. And instead of being based on population, the Senate is based on states. So there are 2 senators per state, meaning there are 100 members of the Senate. And that number does not change. That is actually listed in the Constitution. Now, the senators represent their state that they are a resident of. And because they represent a state rather than a district, that means they have a larger geographical area to cover. And that means they have a more diverse electorate or constituency. So they have to address a lot of problems, which is part of the reason why terms are different and structure is different. Now, originally, unlike the House, the Senate was originally chosen by state legislatures. So in the Constitution, prior to the 17th Amendment, they are chosen by the state legislative bodies. What the 17th Amendment does is it actually made the process more democratic during the Progressive era. And this broadens democracy by allowing for the direct election of senators. So yes, currently we elect both the House and the Senate. Now, unlike the House, the Senate has a little bit of longer terms. They have 6-year terms, and unlike the House where they are up for re-election at the same time, the Senate has staggered elections. So a third 33 seats in the Senate are up for re-election every 2 years. So the purpose of this, 6-year terms, insulates the Senate from public opinion more than the House. They don't have to worry about being voted out of office so soon. It's more consistent. These staggered elections make it more continuous as well. And if you want to think about this saucer and cup analogy, right, the idea was the Senate was supposed to be the body of uniformity and order for the framers of the Constitution. Now, I also want to talk about requirements for both the House and Senate. So requirements for the House are a little bit different. You can be a little bit younger, 25 years old. You have to be a citizen of the United States and a resident of the United States for the last 7 years. You do not have to live in your district if you are a part of the House of Representatives. So you can live outside of that small geographic area that you represent. Now, when it comes to rules and debate, there is a little bit of difference as well between the House and the Senate. The House has very formal, limited debate, and the reason, quite frankly, is because of its size. With 435 members, there has to be some sort of formal, limited debate to make sure that things can get done at all. For example, there are rules that the House has to follow, being one, that a representative may not speak for more than an hour. Something that creates this formal debate is the House Rules Committee. There is not a Rules Committee in the Senate. This is unique to the House of Representatives. And we will visit this later when we talk about and cover the bill to law process. But essentially what you need to know right now is this Rules Committee establishes the efficiency of the House. It decides how much time a bill can be debated and how many, if any, amendments can be added to a bill, just to make sure that a bill doesn't stay in the House of Representatives for an insanely absurd amount of time. Now, unique to the House is also something called the Committee of the Whole, and again, we'll talk about this in the bill to law process, but ultimately, this is designed to allow longer debates among fewer people. The members of the House vote as a group. It's designed to push things along a little bit quicker. So on the flip side, the Senate requirements are you must be at least 30 years of age, a citizen of the U.S., so that is similar, but you must be a resident in the U.S. at least 9 years. So there is a little bit more of a requirement there. And differently, you must be a legal resident of your state. So you do have to have a residency requirement to be in the Senate. So if you were an Ohio senator, you would have to live in the state of Ohio. Now, rules and debate differences between the House and the Senate, because of its size, is less formal. That means there are some interesting things that can happen when it comes to proposing and passing legislation. The best known is the filibuster, and the purpose of a filibuster is to stall or kill, essentially, a bill, to let time run out on a deadline for voting or to wear down the opposition. You literally talk the bill to death. There are many examples in pop culture and in history. What I've linked here is an example of Ted Cruz from a few years ago. I know there's examples in Parks and Rec. If you've ever seen the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, there's a very famous one. But there are just a few rules when it comes to filibustering. 1, you cannot stop. 2, you cannot take a break. That is pretty much it. I think there's some requirements on not eating or drinking for a certain amount of time besides water, but you do not in a filibuster have to talk about the bill itself. In a lot of these filibusters, if you were to click on this video, you would see Ted Cruz talking about White Castle and reading various books. So it does not have to be about your bill as long as you continue talking and stalling. Now, the Senate also has something known as the cloture rule, and this is designed to end this monstrosity of a filibuster. Ultimately, to stop a filibuster, what this means is you just need a simple majority to close up or stop that debate, and ultimately to call for a vote. And this ends the filibuster and ultimately debate on the bill. So this is a way to get around this unlimited debate in the Senate. All right, so now moving on to constitutional differences. There are different powers assigned to each chamber of Congress in the Constitution. So starting in the House, biggest one here is going to be that in the House, all revenue or tax bills originate or are initiated. A senator cannot introduce a tax or revenue bill. And the reason for this is revenue bills they start in the most representative body, right? The House of Representatives is supposed to be closer to the people. It was the body originally elected by the people. So with matters of money, it should start closer to them. Another constitutional difference, the House of Representatives is responsible for selecting the president if there is a tie in the Electoral College or no one receives a vote of 270 votes. And as we've talked about in class, the House of Representatives has the sole power to bring impeachment charges on a federal official. Now, the Senate has a little bit more responsibility when it comes to constitutional power, namely, as we've talked about, the advice and consent power of the Senate. This is that ability to confirm or deny presidential appointments of the president, whether that's cabinet secretaries, federal judges, foreign ambassadors, even U.S. ambassadors to other countries. So this is a really large check on presidential power. And the Senate may even recommend people for positions that they approve. So in this advice and consent of these, bureaucratic positions or ambassadors, secretaries, there is a hearing, and then they decide voting on a simple majority whether that person should be appointed or not. The Senate, unlike the House, has quite a bit of foreign affair powers. So while the president can negotiate treaties with foreign nations, the Senate is what is responsible for approving, ratifying those treaties, or denying them, which has happened. And foreign affairs happens here in the Senate due to the continuity of the Senate, and this was pushed by the Federalists, right? You want these really big decisions to be done by those of the saucer, right? The consistent, uniform, reasonable, quote unquote, branch or section of Congress. And then on the flip side, whereas the House has the sole power to bring or start the impeachment process, the Senate has the sole power of trying that impeached official and deciding if they are acquitted or convicted, as we've mentioned in class. Okay, so that concludes our very brief overview of the House and the Senate and congressional basics. So to summarize, we're going to be talking about these in class, so please make sure you answer these on your notes. I have 3 summary questions for us. I want you guys to answer and think about to summarize, what we've mentioned. How is our bicameral Congress a result of debates at the Constitutional Convention? Why do you think the House and Senate carry different responsibilities? And how do the differences in the House and Senate affect the way they operate and how policy is made? So I look forward to hearing you guys or hearing your thoughts in class when we next see each other. And if you guys have any questions, please make sure to jot those down and I'll answer them in class. See you later. Bye.